Today I am joined by one of my favorite people, my friend Andrea Ferguson. And Andrea Ferguson is the creator, the founder of the Fit Life Method, and she's currently an inner conditioning coach. So Andrea, can you please introduce yourself a little more and tell us like why you would possibly be talking about this topic?
The female, I think it's like, I almost feel like the guilt trip is part of our wiring in some way. I don't like to say wiring because it feels so permanent in that way. But I just feel like as a coach, as a mentor, this is a really common theme. And also for myself, right? This is something that I have had to work through tons in my own life. And so like, it's real for me, and I know it's real for you too. So if it's real for us, it's likely real for others. So, and it can be such a barrier, right? It's such a barrier. So I think the more light and awareness we can bring to it, the more we can help. Oh, there I am. Now I'm mumblery.
You're good. You're good.
Yeah. So yeah, just as my work and the work I do, and obviously just being a woman or female myself. I also think that like just even culturally or historically, this is sort of, a bit of ingrained in us. And so I just think we're coming to a time where you're ready to move past that. So I am excited to talk about this today. So thank you for having me here today, Anne.
Of course. Thank you for taking the time, Andrea. So as you guys know, I coach women. Something I inherited actually from Andrea because she was my my mentor sort of, and she had a women's only fitness studio. I love working with women, but I see a lot of themes, obviously, because there's a lot that's unique to us, those of us who identify as women. And one of them that's really been speaking loudly this month, both from applicants to my program, friends, followers, my current clients, is guilt. So I have some sort of sentences that I've been hearing really frequently in the past or currently. And so Andrea and I are going to kind of go through them. And she has sort of like a process for unpacking each one. So if you have some time or place or situation where you feel guilt that we haven't talked about, I'd love to hear it. So put it either in the comments or send me a message. Perhaps I should ask this of you first, Andrea, like, how do you, in coaching women for all these years, what role does guilt play? How does guilt show up?
So often we're seeing guilt in areas when we're asking to make ourselves a priority in our own lives. So generally, if you think about any areas where you're starting to feel guilt, whether it's when we're looking at investing in ourselves or creating more time and space for ourselves, or making our needs a priority in some way, or our desires a priority in some way, that's where I tend to see kind of the guilt trip kick in. And it's a guilt trip actually that we guilt ourselves. It's our own, like it's a guilt trip that it feels like it's coming from outside of us often, or triggered from outside of us, but that's why like the female guilt trip is like this, we guilt ourselves. And that's sort of the areas I tend to see it in, or have even experienced it in my own life. The root cause though, the underlying of everything is generally the same.
Okay, yes, and let's talk about that for each sort of situation. So let's go, because you were mentioning I think you said like making yourself a priority. So yes, I hear this. So here's just an example I hear from my clients who are working so hard, trying so hard to do things for themselves, and then they feel guilt for doing what they want to do and taking that time away from their anyone they're caretaking, their children, a parent, or their spouse. Yeah.
So what's at the heart of that is the question?
Yeah, or let's unpack that one, like with your process. Yeah.
So actually, I think they're all generally the same. So whether it's,
okay.
So if you're looking at either any of the situations, essentially there's sort of that root underlying thing is that when I make my need a priority, then I am triggering the guilt. So at the root of that though, at the root of the situation there is really, I'm looking at this, in order for me to be safe, be loved, feel secure in this world, I have to. So then we have these rules. I have to keep the peace. I have to make sure somebody else is happy, or make sure they're happy, or make sure they're taken care of. And it's like my responsibility to do that. Or it's my job to, in order for me to be a good mom, or a good friend, or a good partner, or a good daughter, I have to. And we have these rules. So often what happens is we have these rules around what it takes to be good, what it takes to have, to get love or to belong. And then we have these real belief systems, deeply rooted belief systems attached to those. And so when we then go, let's say for the beautiful example you just gave, which is, and all of a sudden I've worked really, really hard and now I've got to take time for myself. It's bumping up possibly against the belief that I deserve to have time for myself. You know, if that person, if those people's needs are more important than mine, then me making my need important than theirs, more important than theirs, will trigger guilt. Okay, so it'll be very uncomfortable for us, right? So at the heart of that is likely a need that I don't deserve to have my needs equal, that I have to make other people's needs a more priority than mine. So there's a belief there, right? In order to be a good mom, in order to get love, in order to keep the peace. That makes sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. And from where do those beliefs come or originate?
Just learned. They're learned beliefs, right? So we may have, like I said, very much it's sort of in the patriarchal institution that we're all existing in. I think that there's definitely that layer of things that has a huge influence. And then we learned them, you know, so we maybe witnessed people or caregivers doing that in our own lives. We were taught it some way, you know, whether it's from, you know, important people in lives, often that's where we learned what it took to be a good. That's one of the things that I really had to evaluate for myself. It was a big one for me, is what is a good mom, you know, or what is a good partner? And when I started to recognize that it was like, oh, self-sacrifice, you know, when I sacrifice myself, that makes me good, you know, or
you're a martyr,
worthy, right? You know, and so when I started to really have to be able to unpack my definition of what is a good. And so I really believe that when we talk about struggling with making our needs a priority, like you said, when we're making somebody else's needs a priority, likely we have a definition going on within us that we've got going on, and it's probably unconscious. It's just what I've learned, what I think is true, what I've come to believe, you know, as a result of what I've experienced.
So is there how do we know if there's a possibility that those things are not true? Like if that's all we've ever existed with, like how do we know? Because I know, you know, as you do in working together, like our ego will be like, but what if that's true? What if it's true? How do we know? Yeah.
How do we know? And here's one of the first pieces is when the part I had to really come to terms with, even for myself, is really, really recognizing that I actually, as an adult, get to decide for myself. Like when I realized that at some point, I was like, wow, I actually get to decide this for myself. Like I get to decide what my definition of good is. And then my job is to honor that, you know. And I think most of us, our definition of good, you know, I don't even like the definition of good anymore. I try to move away from all of this stuff now, and it's really about love. So if I'm to come from a place of love, right, and being loving both to myself and to the people in my world, what would that look like to me? To me, did you hear the word? To me, right? Because ultimately I got to live this life. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm the one who has to experience the result of my choices. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Wow. Permission to decide for yourself.
Permission to decide for yourself. I love that. So let's break that down a little bit, because I feel like in my experience with coaching, it's easier for people to challenge that with their peer, so their partner, for example. So it might be easier to acknowledge that, okay, yes, because what I hear you saying is we're valuing that others' needs are greater than more of a priority than ours. So really, are we asking ourselves to just accept that our experience is as valuable, our needs are as valuable, not necessarily more valuable, but as valuable as someone else. And so then I think it becomes trickier with children, because it's like, isn't that our job? Like, aren't they supposed to be the number one priority? So that's what I hear. And so like, how do we manage that?
Yes. So one of the things that I had to really look at as a parent was, I think we get really focused on that is in the taking away of, like that I'm taking away time or I'm taking away from them. And so then it feels like you're causing a deficit or causing a problem with the situation. But really, when I'm coming from a place of deficit, meaning like I don't have the energy, I don't have the time, I don't have, or the energy rather, or to show up fully present, I'm not serving anyone. Let's be real, I'm just not. So I really had to get into the energy of more of an abundance mindset. So what are they gaining as a result of me making this choice?
I love that.
What is everybody gaining when I come from a place of fullness? So when I make my needs equally as important as everybody else's, equal. And I think you just said it before, it's so important. When we're coming from that deficit model, the minute we start to make it like even, it feels like we're making it more, but we're actually just finally making it equal. And we're adding value. You know, we're bringing more love, where we can serve much better when we're coming from a place of fullness. Like, we know this, like, what's our temper like when we're coming from like deficit mode? We're not in best service, right? So I really just seen it in that place where when we invest in ourselves, the time and energy and however we're feeling called, and make our needs equal a priority, we're bringing something to the table, and we're modeling, we're modeling what this looks like, to make our needs a priority.
Yeah.
And again, really remembering that this isn't looking like now all of a sudden I'm more important than you. We're not doing that. It's an and situation. Your needs are important, and so are mine. So what does this look like? How do we make room for all of us? I totally get, though, that depending on the ages and stages of your kids, that will look different for everybody. But you get to decide what that could look like for you, right? And it can evolve over time, which is the beautiful thing about, say, teenagers versus some of the younger kids. Sometimes it can be easier when they're a little bit more self-sufficient, right? We have to recognize that. However, there's still possibility to create the space.
I just had two aha moments when you were saying that. One is because I'm obviously very familiar with like abundance mentality, lack mentality, but I always thought about it and coached it in terms of like money, success, like, but what you just said is you can also apply that to this, like the taking away time from the family, money from the family, energy. That's a lack mentality, when really there is an abundance of all of those things.
Yes, but we have to choose to see it as that.
Yes.
No, when we shift our perspective and how we see it, what we experience shifts. So if I'm trying to go get time for myself, believing that I'm taking time from myself and then that's the experience I'm going to get, which is I'm going to perpetuate the guilt and perpetuate all the energy that comes in the situation will be not one that really serves. So shifting your perspective on it is first really empowers you to actually shift it with everybody.
Yes. I love that. And then the other thing I have, which I'm not sure if I will articulate this correctly yet, but sort of like the download that I had was like, the feeling of caretaking feels good. So regardless of like the age, so if you have a little tiny baby, the act of like feeding them feels good and taking care of them. Is it annoying that they like wake you up and cry and poop? Yes, of course. But the actual like caretaking, the feeling is good. So, and then that kind of goes for all ages. Like, I'm sure when you have teenagers, it still feels good to feed them, even though it's probably very annoying and expensive, right? But the annoying and expensive is like the story that we've created about the caretaking. We're always going to do the caretaking and it's going to feel good. It's just like, what else is going on and how much energy do we have to, does that make sense?
Yeah. And what do you focus on too, right? So again, we have to focus our energy on. We could focus and choose to focus our energy and attention on what's annoying, because there always will be. There's always going to be things that are hard or annoying, but if we choose to focus that on all the time, we're just going to get more of that. And then you just ruin your own peace of mind.
Yes, totally. Okay, I have a couple more questions, but okay, what about this guilt one, which I've heard as well, which is like, I asked for this. I prayed for this partner and he's here and I have him, but he's driving me freaking crazy. I wanted this job, I have it, and now I'm like super overwhelmed. I prayed for these babies, now I have them and I'm freaking exhausted. So I don't have a right to feel I feel guilty for feeling guilty. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
This is what I hear. Yeah.
I asked for this. And so now I have to live with the consequences of it. And I feeling guilty for not appreciating it, or I'm feeling bad for not loving every moment of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Oh yeah. So that definitely that there's, we can have these things come into our lives. And so maybe that's bumping up against maybe what your expectation of it was. So perhaps the expectation of what you thought this thing would bring in wasn't quite what you thought. And now we'll have to deal with that, right? Deal with how it may be different from what the expectation was. I think what I would do in that situation, or how to handle that situation, is the practice of acceptance, right? Accepting things as they are, right? And so recognizing, well, this may not be exactly how I anticipated it or pictured it. I accept it as is. And I allow myself to accept it as is and allow it to be what it is. And also that could look like, wow, I'm feeling frustrated right now, or this is feeling harder than I thought, right? And allowing that. And it's almost like that there is an allowing of some real and honest feelings about the fact that relationships, life, isn't all about coasting up here all the time. There's these opportunities for growth that happen all the time.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. So we see our guilt is always calling attention. Right? It's always calling attention to what we like. There's a dynamic or a belief or a way of seeing something that may be calling up for healing or clearing. Right. And it's usually inviting in a new perspective or something, or a dynamic that needs to be addressed.
Yes. So that's a question that I was going to ask too, but Karina she had an aha moment. She said, what if we start seeing ourselves as worthy of caretaking too? And she said that was a good aha moment.
Beautiful.
Yes. Yes. And when I think about just personally,
I just add to that? So I want to add
yes,
to
please.
Coming in right away from that is sometimes what happens is when we see ourselves as worthy of caretaking. Oh, so this is going to land here. This one makes you want to cry a little bit. Sometimes when we don't believe we're worthy of care, like we don't believe we're worthy, or we have to suffer enough or work hard enough, like to deserve our needs to be met, we go caretake, just in the hopes that something or someone will finally take care of us. And it's coming from this place of kind of guilt or unworthiness, and that's what's fueling the caretaking. Right. And so when we can like shift, like Karina just said, into the place like, wow, I actually believe that I deserve to be taken care of too. And who's in charge of that? You, right? Like we're in charge of that for ourselves, is to take care of ourselves, to take care of our own needs. That doesn't mean that we can't go get help and be supported. However, we are in charge of those. We don't need anything outside of us. Right. So giving ourselves full permission to love on ourselves and care for ourselves is one of the greatest honors we can do. And it helps bring into balance this sort of caretaking. If our worth is attached to the caretaking, then sometimes we're over investing in other people, which leads to depletion and then the guilt cycle.
Yes. I love that. Yeah. Karina, let us know if that landed for you. It did for me for sure. Andrea, I want to go back to that, like briefly, you said, we kind of like live in a patriarchy. So some of this kind of stuff is just like inherited and it's just a little bit left over. So what if, because this is something that I hear sometimes with clients too, is I don't know how to say this, but it's like I'm hearing someone else's voice that's not theirs. Do you know what I mean? And so I'm like, who's
way of trained belief?
Yeah. Or like, or like, my husband thinks this. My husband like thinks I should do this. And then I've also had from clients like, what if like, but how do I get out of that? Like, what if we want to shift that?
So waiting for permission outside of self, or when someone else is directing, like.
Yeah, I think, like shifting that tendency. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a power. It's like it's somewhat, so at the very heart of that is a person who is not seeing their own power, or not believing in their own ability, or not seeing their own, it's always an invitation to, it's always an invitation to see your own power and to decide for yourself. Now, I'm not saying that's all of a sudden becomes conflict over there. However, whenever we're in a situation where we're giving our power away to something outside of us, or allow something outside of us to decide for us, or we're having trouble deciding for ourselves, so we ask something else to decide for us, that is always an indication to go that we've got some work to do when it comes to owning our power.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
And usually the heart of that is that like sometimes we're afraid because we are taking responsibility how someone else feels, or we want somebody to take responsibility for how we feel, which is a little sneaky thing called codependence. And so it's just calling attention to that dynamic that is obviously calling up to be addressed. So it's an opportunity for you always.
I love that. And so how do we shift? How do we shift from these? Do we ever get rid of feelings of guilt? Do we want to? Like, how do we get out of this icky feeling?
Yeah, great.
That's holding us back and making us play small, to be honest.
Yeah, causing us all to suffer.
Yeah.
So there's a perspective that I find helpful. So I believe that we're all spiraling through life. Okay, so we're all on an upwards ascension, spiraling through life. So this is the perspective I like to invite. So, what we're spiraling towards is we're moving out of fear and towards love. And when we're spiraling through something, there's learning on every level of the spiral. So like I just said to you, and I said, oh yeah, this is the big thing I've been working through this year. You're like, really? And I'm like, yeah, at the level I'm at now, like, you know what I mean? I don't have some of the same, like, I don't have any problems putting money on myself now or investing in myself, but I used to. Like, that's not even a question anymore. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, like I just do that. But I'm at a new level now. And so as I'm spiraling through life, which is a beautiful way to move through life, sometimes we're on the front end of the spiral where everything is like, it feels like summer and spring or spring and summer. It's like everything's going well, like da, da, da. And then as we come on the back end of a spiral, which is like fall and winter, it's where there's sometimes like, I can feel, we can move through it on a daily basis or on a much bigger kind of cycle. But sometimes when we're feeling something like guilt, it's an invitation. Oh, I'm just coming into fall and winter, meaning that there's some growth opportunity here. So guilt is always pointing to an opportunity for you to grow. And it's calling attention in you to where you might not feel like you are, have the power or permission to honor yourself, right? And so it's always calling attention to that on some level, and how that may look may be different for everybody, but that's what it's calling attention to. Where am I not denying myself? Where am I believing that I'm not deserving enough? Where do I think that my needs are not important enough? Where am I being called to stand stronger or set a boundary or to own what is right for me, even if it's not right for someone else? God, that's one of the hardest. One of the hardest. But I can express it and do it lovingly, right? And so when we come around and we honor it, and so when we step in, so when we move, when we kind of get the lesson, like, oh, I'm being called. So the question I love to ask is, if I believed I was worthy and deserving, what would I choose? So we have to, I would do this. Well, then you got to go do that. And if you're like, oh, I can't, well, what healing, what action, what help do you need in order to do that? You may need help with this, okay? And then when we do, we come around that spiral, we're back to spring and summer. Right? And then we just beautifully are spiraling up. So will guilt ever go away? Well, it's part of our full spectrum of emotions. And so does it affect, like at the level up here, does it affect me the same as when I was operating down here? Probably not. Move through it a bit quicker, can tune up quicker, and it's usually happening in a very different way, but it still affects me. We're human, right? And so it's always an invitation. It's always an invitation. And so whenever we set out on this path, which is I want to go improve myself in some way, as soon as we make that statement or declaration, even if we don't take any action, really, this is our current experience, right? And in our current belief system, and our whole life is based, our current experience is based on the beliefs, the way we operate here. So you just go, oh, I want to get healthy and fit. You just went like this. You just changed the dynamic. You deciding to improve, up level your energy. So what happens is this starts to rumble. This isn't no longer a match for this. And so it starts to rumble, and that looks like a kid going, what, you're going out again? You know, or you're not making dinner tonight, which was mine like last week. You're not making dinner again? And it's calling attention to my story. So it's always calling attention to your story or your beliefs that are calling up for hearing. And instead of going, oh, see, I'm a bad mom. Oof, better go back down here. Oh, see, I don't have permission. Oh, right, here we are. No, it's saying, okay, we've got to address this. And so called up my story of being a bad mom, which totally not what my daughter was doing. She just wanted dinner.
Yes.
She just wanted dinner.
That's
and
your story.
I'm like, I'm really sorry. It won't be right now. Okay. Like, you know, and I got to deal with the feeling of like, yeah, this is going to be okay. And so then we deal with this, then our life begins to shift to match. As I improve, shift up, deal with it, comes up to match. So sometimes we hear the rumbling, but if we have the tool to deal with the rumbling and just see it as an opportunity for us to clear what's not a match anymore, and we can invite people along or invite the things to shift, and it may rumble a bit, and that's okay. The rumbling is good for you. It's showing you it's no longer a match.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, right.
We are like pretty much at time. So I'm just going to see if there's any last questions here. And if you guys have questions, I'm sure Andrea and I can answer them in text later on. But before we're done, Andrea, I just wanted you to let everyone know that last piece was gold, by the way. I'm going to say that in the comments. Like, you definitely have to watch till the end for that, because that's it. That's pretty much it.
Yes.
So where can people connect with you and find you and work with you if they would like?
Yeah, my website, you can just go to my website is thefitlifemethod.com. You can connect through Facebook. There, all of my links are there, so you can find me through that. Probably the easiest thing.
Okay. I just put, it didn't hyperlink. I'll do it again. I put it in the comments. And then, oh yeah, there it worked. So
I'm
Andrea's
on Instagram and I'm on Facebook, so you can find me under the Fit Life Method in those as well. But you go to my website, it's all linked there.
Yeah, I just put it in the comments there. And then funnily enough, next week, my Facebook Live is with Colleen Taylor, who I know. And so Andrea's doing a course. Tell them about your course you're doing with Colleen.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I'm so excited about this because I get excited a lot. I realize I say that a lot.
You do. It's okay.
I do. Yeah. So I'm launching a course with Colleen starting next Friday, called Prosper. And this conscious money mastery. So this is all about becoming empowered within to grow your money. And this is so much my journey. So again, my guilt and insecurity showed up massively in my financial situation. So this is really about coming from the inside out. Often we think our money stuff has something to do with money, and it really doesn't. But we can definitely improve our financial situation when we're willing to do the work around it, and then it transfers and creates a whole new financial picture for ourselves. And of course, Colleen is a certified financial planner, and she is going to do where you lead you through a do-it-yourself financial plan. So I'm pretty excited about all that too.
That's awesome. Yeah, and this is totally unrelated that she is my person next week. I love it. But yeah, I love it too.
Fabulous.
She is.
You know what she does? One thing I love is she keeps everything very real and relatable. She doesn't talk about you. It's all like, she makes it so easy and accessible. So, which is important.
Yes. So I'm talking to her here next week at 4. So thank you, Andrea. Put your website in the comments. Thank you for taking the time. And if you guys are watching or you're watching the replay, please just, if you have questions, just leave them here. Andrea and I both get excited about talking about this stuff. So go to town.
Awesome.
Okay, thanks, love. Talk to you soon.